For our third video, we'll start off talking about the couple of statements that you'll be reading. One's a professional educator commitment statement. Now you may say, well, what's a professional educator? How many years you have to be in the system to do that? It has nothing to do with years. Professional has to do with a commitment to constant improvement based on data, the foundational requirement of all accrediting agencies. And as long as we're committed to that constant improvement, then we are a professional educator. So we're not talking about a professional lecturer. We're not talking about a professional instructor. We're talking a professional educator to focus on learning. But as we read over that, I want you to think about some things. Which parts are you uncomfortable with? Which parts resonated with you? A lot of folks had that part that says the mission is more important than our personal comforts. They had a problem with that. And it's more of the mindset than it is reality. That has to be the mindset, because otherwise, every time I got uncomfortable with something, I just quit doing it. I was like, well, this is too uncomfortable, I'm going to quit it. So it's saying the mission is more important than that little bit of discomfort we have to feel when we're trying something new. And the same thing will hold for the leadership oath. Now, the leadership oath, you say, well, that's for our department chairs, division directors, deans. Well, we've already said the most important leaders on campus are faculty. So faculty are our leaders. Teddy Roosevelt talks about when to make a decision. The worst thing we can do is nothing. And that's why on that statement at the bottom, doing nothing, no longer an option. Doing nothing when it comes to improving student learning, success, retention, closing achievement gaps, creating a more equitable opportunity, doing nothing, no longer an option. Now, I want you to think about it. How is that different than saying constantly improve? How is doing nothing not an option different than the SACS requirement of constant improvement? And when you think about it, you'll think, well, there's not a difference. It just sounds different. Now, the beauty of this is you can choose what you want to do. It doesn't matter what, doesn't matter how much, doesn't matter what level. Just doing nothing, no longer an option. Be decisive, in other words, make a decision. If we're doing an activity, you'd write down 3 things that you could do or change about your classes just so far in response to what little bit we've talked about. And then you'd share those with your groups and write about them. Things you could still do on your own campus, with your own department, division, or whatever. But what could I do based on what I've heard so far? There's folks you can send to some of the best conferences on the planet, and they'll come back with nothing. They'll talk about how terrible it was, didn't get anything out of it. Others, you could send some faculty to the worst conferences on the planet, and they'll come back with something, because that's their mindset. They're always looking for ways to improve. ACCS mission says we want to be unified. Now, we know historically that's not been the case. We've operated as separate institutions, sometimes separate departments, separate divisions, sometimes separate faculty. But becoming unified is a challenge. And that word excellence is the most used word in mission statements around the country. Now, we have a grading system that very clearly defines excellence as an A, and that's not everybody. So although we may feel like we're excellent, is that what the results show? And then our vision to development and educated. And we put a question mark there because that, once again, that's different than a couple of decades ago. A couple of decades ago, it had to do with knowledge. Now it has to do with how do you use that knowledge? How do you communicate and critically think with that knowledge? And an affordable pathway. It's not affordable when somebody has to continue to retake courses. It's not affordable when I have to go pay for a tutor because I can't figure out the structure of the class. So an education system where education works for all, where their achievement gaps don't exist. And yes, there are colleges all around the country that have reached that point. They have completely closed student achievement gaps. Look at the family income we mentioned a while ago, directly related to success. You could take a group of 4-year-olds in a room, and the number one predictor of their future success would be family income. Now, that doesn't mean how much money's coming in. There's a difference here. Income is how much we've earned on the job. You look down here at the $20,000 category. Of course, if you have a family and you're in the less than $20,000 salary, you're going to get some government support, and that support will increase that number up to the $40,000, $60,000 range in most cases. Now, because it increased it to the $40,000, $60,000, do you think the scores moved up to what they would be in the $40,000, $60,000? And they did not. So when we say it's directly related to income, we're talking about how much is earned coming in, not how much was given. And you'll notice that these lines don't even cross. This is a direct correlation in every category for 3 different areas: critical reading, math, and writing. So that's our difference here. I came into education, I was all about equality. I was making sure I gave equal. If one student was was allowed 5 minutes of tutoring, then every student ought to be allowed 5 minutes of tutoring. And then I realized how ridiculous that was when I started thinking about it. That was an old paradigm way of thinking that did not hold for 21st century. Equity, why would we give all 3 students a box to stand on when one doesn't even need the box? So if we spread those out, we've created a situation of equity. Now everyone can achieve the outcome. You say, yeah, but you gave this one 3 boxes to stand on. You gave this one more support. You gave them more guidance. Well, maybe this one over here in the blue, maybe he got that from his upbringing. Maybe he got that from his home environment. Maybe they got that from his culture. The one in yellow, maybe they didn't. So they're already unequal when they start off if one has the support and the other doesn't. What we're doing is providing the support to get them up to the level of some of those other students. So a little bit of difference there between equity and equality. This article kind of tried to put that in words. You can read it to yourself. So the question is, what does the data show? Does the data show that there's a disconnect here? Because if it does, then what are we doing about it? The statistics absolutely appalling. Could not believe this when I first read it. I could not believe the level of persistence was so low that even failing a withdrawal from one course cut their chance of completion in half. So I called the folks at that time, I was in Wallace and Dothan, called the research department and said, can you run this data? Because there's no way this can be true. When it came back, it was almost spot on. The first withdrawal or failure, their chance, it was overcut in half. Actually, it was 58%. And the second failure withdrawal, it was exactly cut in half again. And by the third and fourth withdrawal, virtually negligible chance of completion. I think we had 3 or 4 students out of about 400 that completed. So you wonder why so much effort has to be put in those upfront early courses, those gateway courses, first year highest enrollment courses, because that's where your students are. That's where the biggest difference can be made, focusing on those courses. Now we're going to look at some of the state data. This was a part of the presentation that was usually saved for about the 4th session in ILA. But we had so many folks in that 4th session say, well, if I'd have known this, it would all have made more sense. Because see, all they knew was what happened in their department or what happened in their classes. Very seldom did they even know what was going on at their own institution, much less the entire state. So we decided to move this up front here. Now what we're looking at are the top 9 general education, the highest enrollment courses we have. This is where the most students are. It'll have the most impact on student retention and completion. Now I'm going to go back to this statement a minute, because as you're filling in your worksheet, you're looking for some of these answers, I'm sure, just as students would be. If my chance of completion is cut in half if I fail a withdrawal, well, what if all of a sudden I was in a class where teachers use these high impact strategies, it enhanced my learning, it enhanced my performance, and I passed the class? Where I would have normally failed, I now pass the class. Then my chance of completion has been doubled compared to what it would have been if I had withdrawn or failed. So that's the power of every additional student that's successful in our class. It don't matter if it's one student. If we had one student successful per class, we teach about 14, 15 sections a year. That'd be 14, 15 students a year that was successful that would not have been before. 150 for a decade and almost 500 for an entire teaching career. So the power is in the numbers. Let's look at the top 9 enrollment courses. These are first term, first year highest enrollment, non-developmental. And this, by the way, was fall 16. Data's a little lagging on these. The top half of the colleges average 75% for those courses, for all 9 of them together. The bottom half averaged 65, a full letter grade difference here. Now what we will point out is there were 3 colleges that were actually in the bottom average there, but they did an initiative, and that initiative focused on the top enrollment courses. Not one institution, 3. It focused on those high enrollment courses. You know, so when fall 16 data showed them, they were the top 3 in the entire state for an average of those courses, because that's where they put their focus on. Now, of course, we could show the data for all those 9 courses, and they're listed right here for you. For those 9 courses across ACCS. And if we showed that graph, you'd say, well, there's some a little higher, some a little less. It's not, doesn't get me real excited. Now, if we showed the same graph, but depicted it a little different, listed it high to low, you know, took off redundant areas. You know, our first course was well above 50%. So why would we even include 0 to 50? redundant areas. Why would we include anything over 75% when none of the institutions reach that level? Once again, redundant areas. So we maximize the effectiveness of the graph and the impact that graph can have, sometimes by the way we present it. Look at the course success rates. We're presenting it a different way. We actually started this one at 67% instead of the 57 of the previous graph. And although this is an average, we had plenty of institutions where there were some of these courses were the lowest success rate of all their 9 courses. You think, well, wouldn't it be Math 100 for all these institutions? No, some of them it was music, some of them, I think one it was art, a couple more it was biology. So you say, well, let's just look at art then. Let's look at art appreciation, art 100. That's all the institutions in the state and their average success rate for fall 16. Once again, we threw the average line in there. Looks like around 75% for art 100. That's the average success rate in the state of Alabama for art 100. Now, if we redrew that graph to look like this, it would be inherently obvious the top third, middle third, and bottom third in terms of success rates for these courses. Notice the range here, 3 letter grade range. 3 letter grade range for the same course. Now you may say, well, it depends on the institution. Some institutions have better prepared students than others. That is what you would think. That is what logic would say. That's not what the data shows. The data shows some of the institutions with some of the best school systems in the state have some of the lower success rates, and vice versa. Some with some of the least prepared students have some of the higher success rates. So success rates alone, let's make this clear since we're talking about this discussion. Success rates alone do not reflect the learning that goes on that classroom. It's not to say high success rates are not a problem. They may be. We don't know what goes on in that class. What we can say is that low success rates are absolutely a problem. And it's also a problem when you have that big of a range for a course. We cannot even guarantee the accuracy of a grade within 3 letter grades for our courses. And you'll see this for all the top courses. This is Art 100. Goes from about 55 to 90 is our graph. We go to biology, we see the same distribution. Once again, we look at that, the difference here, that's almost 4 letter grade difference. So you wonder why we need to be unified as a system. Why do we need collaboration? Why do we need to get there to discuss these things? The data couldn't be more obvious here why. The average for this course looks like it's around 68%. Computer science, and once again, we see the same range. We're talking over 30%, over 3 letter grade range. Overall average seems to be around 67% for this course. English had one of the largest ranges. That's 35% range. And once again, looks like the state average is around 73 for that course also. Math 100, state average below 60%, right around 58%. But once again, it totally depends on which institution it is. Range is one of the largest in the state, not a surprise. 43% range. We have some operating at 33%, some operate at 76%. And once again, the logical reason would assume we have better prepared students. That's not always the case. That's not what the data shows. What about in advising students? What if I could go to any community college in the state I wanted to go to? Wouldn't I go to one that would give me a double the chance of completion? The double the chance of getting through a particular course? What about music appreciation? Now if you look at music appreciation and the range there, we're talking about a 47%, almost a 5 letter grade range. Now there looks like an anomaly out here that's below 50%. Now, once again, high success rates doesn't mean there's not a problem, but low success rates means they're absolutely a problem. Psychology, we see the same large range. Won't go in about 72% average for the state. Speech average is about 70, but once again, look at the range here. Now, if we go back to math, you think, well, that's one of the most non-subjective courses we have on campus. Now, most of our other courses have a large degree of subjectivity to them, but it just screams we need more standardization. When you allow folks to do what they want to, when they want to, and not be accountable for results, it's not a surprise you would get things like this. So we look at 3 institutions. These are all the institutions in the state. Look at the 3 highs. This is how many additional successful students they would have had. if they just had at least the state average for those courses. If they had at least the state average, not above average, not excellence, just average, there would be over 1,000 students that were successful that statistically would not have been prior. That's over 1,000. That's just 3 institutions. That's over 1,000 students that would have their chance of completion doubled. So when you look at that statement, the Governor Ivey said he wanted to add 500,000 workers, where we're going to get them from, we already have them. We just have to get them through to completion with the skills they need. Look at retention rate. Retention rate's a lagging indicator, because when you're looking at 15, 16, if I'm looking at fall 16 and I want to know how many of those students are retained, I have to wait till fall 16 before I'll know that. And then of course we have to wait till the data gets in, gets solidified. It may be a year and a half before we even have that available. But what we do notice here, several institutions have made considerable improvements. So we're making some progress on retention. Now we have some that, which is why we look at data. We go in here and find one that has actually decreased. Well, we need to find what's going on. Or if we have those with large increases, what did they do different? We don't do enough collaboration in the system in order for us to benefit from each other's successes. Too many times when someone talks about their successes, people want to immediately go to, oh, they're just bragging. No, they're just trying to help you. They're trying to inspire and facilitate action in folks that have not done that yet. So they're attempting to help others through that and inspire them. You know, if we want to look in the average in 11 and 12, we were not even retaining half our students across the state. Not even half were being retained. And 11 colleges were below that average. Only 3 are below that in the 16-17 year. So we went from 11 to 3. Our average in 16-17 went up. It was 57% retention. Only 1 college was at or below that average back in 11 and 12. 17 are at or above that average in 16-17. So we're going to celebrate the fact that we're making considerable progress, but we're going to keep things in perspective also. That's why we like to compare to national data. You know, we're looking at our state data for retention rate, and this is according to IPADS, a national system for data. When we look at that, the national average is 61%. Well, we only had 3 colleges operating above that level, 1 at the level and 3 more above the level. So we do have a lot more room to improve. And once again, you can see the wide variance from institution to institution. And that's it for video 3.